For decades, we've been taught to plan for retirement. Some call it the fourth quarter, the last hurrah, heading toward the finish line. But what if the finish line or the fourth quarter doesn't have to be the end at all? What if there was a way to plan for something that outlives all of us, like for 100 years or more? In today's episode, we are going to talk just about that. We've actually been, over the years, studying families who have done exactly the thing we're describing here, making things that outlast and span generations of time. We'll also be taking a look at the research of Dr. Dennis Jaffe, and he spent years studying the world's most famous families and enduring families, and found one simple truth. They don't plan for retirement, they plan for renewal. Let's get into it. When we talk about planning and generational impact,
Right.
it's not necessarily all monetary we're talking about here. I know I brought up the Rockefellers first, and
Sure.
people tend to think wealth in
Right.
terms of like a lot of money, which
Exactly.
is the case.
Right, yeah. Carry out one of his goals for their life or whatever. Never really saw the promise in their lifetime come to fruition, but the generations to come did.
Ones that last, they have to keep reinventing themselves while staying anchored to their shared values. Okay? So we are anchored to. Welcome back to the Legacy Life podcast. So today's topic is not going to necessarily be like a normal topic that we cover. We're going to start a series talking about a little bit of a different aspect of planning.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the average planning narrative we're going to talk about. And when we talk about this subject, usually when you're talking about families who have done what they call generational planning, you know, you might see a documentary done about this family that did these extraordinary things with their planning or all the impact they've been having across, you know, multiple generations. And there's books written on these families and whatnot. So, you know, this can feel like, you know, not a lot of people think in these terms that this is something they could do.
Right.
And we're going to try to maybe address that a little bit today and talk about that. Maybe that's not the case.
Right. Yeah.
Because I mean, I can remember back when I was in my mid 30s, I can remember hearing for the first time like about like the Rockefeller family.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you kind of know the name, but I had never done like a really close look. I mean, you knew the name John D. Rockefeller and
Right.
something about oil and you
Right.
know, 1800s, Industrial Revolution, something, you know.
Right. Exactly.
And then you kind of get into it and you see what's happened to that wealth across generations and whatnot. And I remember going, wow, at that time in my life, I was like, well, man, if I could just like hit my savings goal and maybe I could save enough and maybe my kids, I could send them to college or I, you know, just, you know, pay off the house, you know, then I would be like, I would feel like, you know, done, you know, bucket
Right.
list achieved, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
And, but I was kind of mesmerized, I guess, without even knowing why, just hearing his story. And then I found out like they were not just like an outlier on their own. There were like other families who had done this thing called generational planning
Mm-hmm.
and for all sorts of different reasons.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so I kind of started like doing kind of a deep dive on the subject and, you know, other families who had planned like multi-generationally. And this is like over a span of years now. It's just something that's kind of stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
And after reading their stories, their successes, their failures, and of course for us starting to look through the Bible, some of the generational planning that was done, you know, through some of the families and through some of those stories,
Mm-hmm.
you know, man, I mean, like my eyes were like slowly opened to a whole different way of looking at life.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I mean, for me, that's when I realized, you know, planning for like my life, you know, I guess it's like it's easier to plan that way than it is to plan with like continuation in mind.
Yeah.
You know, because these families, we're going to get into some examples here and just kind of blow my mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, continuation, you know, that's harder, but it can come with a great reward if it's done right. I mean, that's what
Right.
these stories have kind of told me. So I kind of want to talk about some of the examples, like some families who have planned generationally. And then I think, like today is like the first episode of many. I think we're going to kind of cover several aspects of this over the
Okay.
next several. Um, because, just, with the question in mind, when we kind of take a look at some of the overall things over these next few episodes, people might be asking, well, is that something that I really could do? Or the answer is yes. There is possibility and there are opportunities for families of all shapes and sizes to really consider this type of planning. So I want to talk about that a little bit today.
Yeah. All right.
So were you going to say something before we continued?
No, let's get into it. Yeah.
Okay. So first, one of my heroes of the faith is a guy named Jonathan Edwards. And he lived in the 1700s. He was a minister during the pre-colonial times in America before the Revolution, and he eventually became the head of Princeton University.
Okay.
Okay, but I want to read some facts about his life here. This is sometimes we don't necessarily think about this. Whoops. But is what happens, sons and daughters, grandchildren, great grandchildren. What happened to all of them?
Right.
Well, somebody actually took up the project of saying, okay, well, let me take a look at like the life of like Jonathan Edwards, and they compared it to like people who had been incarcerated, and they compared the families and what the results were.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, interesting study. So let's see, Jonathan Edwards, Puritan preacher, 1700s, president of Princeton. They had 11 children.
Oh, wow.
Him and his wife, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so this guy's A.E. Winship, he was the one who decided to trace his lineage 150 years after his death.
Okay.
Okay. And he found that his family included, okay, get this, his family tree included 100 pastors,
Wow.
100 lawyers, 60 doctors, 65 professors, 13 mayors, 75 military officers, 1 U.S. vice president, 3 U.S. senators, and 3 governors.
Wow.
150 years into the future.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And so that's why I think I wanted to start with him to say, when we talk about planning and generational impact,
Right.
it's not necessarily all monetary we're talking about here. I know I brought up the Rockefellers first, and
Sure.
people tend to think wealth in
Right.
terms of like a lot of money, which
Exactly.
is the case.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But there's a lot of different. We don't just define it by that one
Mm-hmm.
metric. There's several, and so I wanted to start with him because it's like that's amazing because he had a lot of impact in his life, obviously, when
yeah.
he lived and what he sowed and what he intentionally did with his life, and end up running one of the most famous universities still in this country, right?
Mm-hmm.
Princeton. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody knows. Kind of shows you too what the origin of those universities were for.
Right.
Was really the equipping of the
right.
saints, right?
Yeah. As opposed to how they are in a little bit now. but
Yeah, exactly. And so, so that's one.
Yeah.
Let me see here.
That's pretty incredible. That's
Yeah.
kind of brings in a little bit more of the eternal perspective and more so long term, especially when you look at scripture and everything. A lot of the people that God chose to carry out one of his goals for their life or whatever never really saw the promise in their lifetime come to fruition,
Right.
but the generations to come did.
Exactly.
And so it's kind of like thinking more so.
Right. Kind of like
far,
Abraham.
yeah,
Yeah.
like just like Abraham, far surpassing your life.
Right.
Yeah.
So get this now. So we switch from a Jonathan Edwards because that's exactly right. They're in Japan, one of the oldest continuous families. Okay. They're operating a family business. It was a hotel business. Okay. The business started, you ready for this? In 718 AD.
Wow.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still operating 1,300 years later by the same family.
Really?
Yeah. Same family.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That has to be like a record for like one of the longest running
It
companies.
is.
Oh, it is the longest running
It is
company?
now the oldest one. Previous to that, the oldest company was a construction company from Japan as well.
Mm-hmm.
They started in AD 578.
Wow.
A construction company, operated it for 1,400 years. sold it in 2006. I guess after all that time, they're like, okay,
They're
look,
like,
we're out.
we're done. That's insane.
Enough building. Yeah. Yeah. 1,400 years of operation, a construction company versus like
Wow.
a hotel,
Right.
right? That's amazing.
Right. They would have had to learn how to do the new like different techniques and things as like new materials arose and new styles of building and everything like that. They'd have to keep up with all of that.
Which is interesting you bring that up because that's actually one of the aspects of how the success of this longevity occurs. That's one of the principles. So
Hmm.
keep that in mind as we'll get to that.
Okay.
But you're right. You have to kind of keep
Adapting.
innovating and
Yep.
adapting. Now, if you go to Germany, the top, I think, top 10 oldest businesses have been, let's see, over 400 years. The top 10 have been in business in Germany back to the 1500s.
Hmm.
So they're, in comparison to those
Right.
Japanese
They're not that
businesses,
old.
they've
Yeah.
just started. Yeah,
Right.
they're just getting off the ground.
Right.
In Italy, 15 of the world's oldest family-owned businesses. The oldest five date back to 1000 AD, 1141, 1295, which is Christopher Columbus time,
Yeah.
1369, and 1385.
Wow.
Yeah, the five oldest in
That's
Italy.
insane
Yeah,
for a company to last that long.
yeah. Like, I think you might look at that and go, well, how?
Right.
Like, how do you stay attached?
I feel like that's unheard of. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
But yet it's happening. It's just not talked about a lot, but it does occur, right?
Hmm.
So this kind of brings me to say, okay, so some of these incredible stories of longevity, of being able to keep like a hotel, like what was a hotel like in what AD?
718.
718
Yeah.
AD
I don't
versus
know.
like, I think of like the Hilton or the Ritz-Carlton now, right?
Right.
Um, but 1,300 years later, I doubt the building looks the same.
No, I doubt it does. Yeah.
And maybe there's not only one location, maybe they have like the family owns, several.
Right.
But yeah, it's hard, I think, for us to get our minds around what that would be like,
Yeah.
or look like. So how do they do something like this? I mean, how is that even possible?
Right.
Right. Well, this guy, Dennis Jaffe, he does the research, and he's probably one of the authorities on studying these families who have done this kind of generational planning, and not
Hmm.
just from length of time. He also looks at like how they do it and like
Right.
what kind of framework they put around the family in order to be able to sustain something like this. I mean, you try to sustain assets for 1,300 years.
Right.
I mean, how many economies did that Japanese business go through?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like, how do you do that?
Right.
So in his work, he did a comprehensive study on multi-generational families, and it's a study called the 100-Year Family Enterprise.
Okay.
Okay, and he did it like nearly 100 families. So
Hmm.
right there, you can say like, okay, it's not just like three people doing this. Like, there's families that we don't even know that are
Right.
like doing these things, right? It's across 20 countries. So he really did a broad stroke. Okay, 100 families, 20 countries to kind of get a sense.
Hmm.
Um, that sustained wealth, purpose, and unity for three or more generations.
Hmm.
Okay, he found three common shifts in how they think. Number one, and we can talk about this a little bit, they shifted when it came to maybe like a family business they owned. They shifted from ownership to stewardship. So
explain the difference.
they stopped seeing as wealth as something that they own.
Hmm.
Okay, and they started seeing it as something they care for on behalf of the next generation.
Okay. Yeah. That
Okay.
makes sense.
Yep. So, you know, um, you're making this wealth now. You're accumulating it through your business or your work or whatever. However you're doing it, they stopped looking at it. Okay, this is what I earned and this is mine. They started saying, no, I'm taking care of this for the next generation.
Right.
And then they'd want to instill that purpose and that same framework to that next generation.
Yeah. It kind of takes the selfishness out of it. And I can see how that would contribute to the longevity of a company then, right?
Right.
Because then your own personal motives, at least to an extent, are out of the picture.
Right. It's not all just for the here and now.
Yep.
There's actually like, no, I'm doing this. There's another purpose, and it's for these people. So I got to take care of this for them.
Hmm.
So so that was the first one. That to me makes a lot of sense. Okay, that would be that'd be a reframe.
Right.
Number two, from stability to renewal. Okay, so in other words, few generations begin and end with the same business in the same place.
Right.
And this was to your point of they had about keeping. You had to keep adapting. I think you said. Yeah. So the ones that last, they have to keep reinventing themselves
Yeah.
while staying anchored to their shared values.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we are anchored to certain values that we honor as family, but the business itself can keep morphing and reiterate and get new iterations
Right.
because times change. Like you said, materials changed when it
Right.
comes to that construction company. We're not building with whatever they built with in 518 or 578
Exactly.
AD.
Right.
Eventually steel and, the way you could ship products across the world all
Yep.
changed, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they had to keep reinventing, but their values stayed the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so, in other words, the word stability there was we can get locked into this is the way I've always done something, and so I'm going to stick with this, and we can never change,
Right. Yeah.
right? That's the stability. I'm
Mm-hmm.
keeping it there instead of keep renewing and having like a resurrection of the business,
Right.
a rebrand,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. Okay, so then number three, from short-term gain to long-term commitment. So they operate by a simple rule, which could be summed up like this. You don't inherit a family enterprise, you borrow it from your grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
That line gets me every time. And
Yeah.
as I've been going through this, I'm borrowing it
Interesting.
from my grandchildren. So, in other words, every generation then has to see themselves as the first one.
Sure. Okay.
So, if I say, Caleb, here's the baton, here's Legacy Life Financial, you take it on and say, this is my grandchildren's.
Yeah.
I'm the first generation that I'm now taking up the mantle of preparing and stewarding this for them.
Right.
When you hand it off, same thing. We
Right.
always see ourselves. So that's the reframe as opposed to um, um, it's just here for my lifetime and who cares what happens after,
Okay. Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
There's an intentionality saying, no, this is going to be handed off in mine. And I want to make sure it's prepared so they can go forward.
Yeah.
So those three things right there are three of the basic premises. There's going to be more we get into, but those are the three basic premises that the reframe that completely informed the rest of their choices
Right.
that they made.
Must be pretty difficult to instill a culture like that over many generations and it having the same, like, stay true.
Yeah.
It's like a big game of telephone that can change over time,
Yeah.
but staying true to the culture that you wanted to create. I can imagine that's really difficult.
Yeah.
Mm,
Absolutely.
yeah,
It would be difficult, but not impossible.
sure.
Yeah, obviously. I mean,
Right.
you've got some businesses who have figured it out.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into that part then. So, yeah, how do you sustain the values and the culture?
Yeah.
So, insights into their like daily life. How do they operate in order to make that happen? So, in his study, the enduring families had a regular connection. So, some of them like did family councils,
Mm-hmm.
family retreats annually, shared decision forums where some families would get together and say, okay, this quarter we have this much to give away, and they would have everyone's input on where it should go,
Okay.
for example,
Mm-hmm.
as well as other decisions. But like that'd be one idea. They didn't just talk about finances; they were also shaping like the identity of who they were.
Right.
Um, and so there's this repetitiveness and this intentionality of setting up like places where you meet and you have conversation and like this is something that's constantly talked about
Mm-hmm.
as part of the family identity.
Yeah.
Like we can get together and talk about the Lions. We can get together and talk about the family identity and where we're going,
Right.
kind of idea,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Not saying you can't talk about sports with your
Sure.
family.
Right. Yeah. Maybe
Um,
that is part of your values. Right.
right. Yeah. This is the business we do, and we watch the Lions.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. um, Okay, and so and the other thing too, we'll bring up and reiterate again, they also paired their innovation with discipline,
Mm-hmm.
which you were just talking about. It was adopting without losing their roots.
Right. Yep.
So they didn't try to freeze time and say, this is a great moment, let's try to preserve this forever. They were under no illusion that while this is great right now, we have to also continue to watch how things change and adapt,
Yep.
or we'll die. You know, we
Right.
have to keep pruning the tree.
Yeah. So it's more so taking, what they need to learn and adapt to and picking out the pieces and saying, does it fit in our framework or does it not fit in? And if it doesn't, then we're not going to do it. But if it fits in, let's bring it in. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And trying to stay true to the vision
Yep.
where you're going, because you can't be everything to everybody all the
Right.
time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then they took the long view. Every decision, whether like a new business venture that they were going to go out or like a charitable gift, it was weighted not by like the next quarter's return.
Yeah.
It was based on how will it impact the next generation
Right.
long term.
Yeah.
How does this seed plant for little Johnny, who's 5, who's going to be part of this family? How does it help him?
Right. Yeah.
Um, so, to be honest, like I can think, I alluded to it earlier when I was younger. I didn't really, think a lot this way. I was running to and fro.
Right. Well, I
Really,
mean, if there's only like a handful of families across the world that actually do this, I don't think anyone really thinks this way all that much, right?
yeah,
I guess when it comes to business, at least.
yeah.
But
Even generational planning, like Jonathan Edwards' family, like the impact he had, like the vocations, the vast vocations that
right.
people chose, but you know,
Yeah.
that have those have impact.
Right. Yeah, but at the same time, like there's a lot of like really good, like even like Christian businessmen that eventually lose their businesses and
Yep.
like sometimes it's just like what God's doing. He's just like it's done, It's
Mm-hmm.
like the good Lord give and he takes away.
Mm-hmm.
Um and so like some of these families are meant to do that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, trying to think too that considering this to be a baton handoff as opposed to just short-term thinking, it's a
Right.
more long-term play. So, this may be a new way for people to kind of think through planning for many watching. And, a lot of people might be like, nah, we really don't care about, the 150 year, it's not really our thing. And that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
That we're not saying everyone has to think this way, but there's gonna be people that this does kind of scratch something, an itch maybe they have, or like, that is something I
Right.
want to talk about
Mm-hmm.
or look at. And we're going to be covering many different aspects of this in the next several episodes here. Um, if people want to start working on this for their family, one small thing they might be able to do is just set aside maybe just 15, 30 minutes for someone and just answer this question. If this is something that, you may want to start considering, just ask yourself, in 100 years, I'd like my family to remember that what?
Right.
To start there. And you were talking about, man, this might be really hard with the telephone game through generations to keep things. They did it without technology,
Right.
um, and with digital stuff today, I mean, you can capture yourself saying things that are really important that could endure digitally for a long time.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You could be speaking to your 5th generation from now if you wanted to.
Right.
You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
the real you, the real face, the real image, not just a black and white photograph, this was my great grandmother,
Right. Exactly.
yeah, they actually can come to light, you can be like a real living voice to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if you take the time to do that one sentence in 100 years, I'd like my family to remember that then take some time, maybe share it, with a spouse, child, grandchild, and maybe just ask them for some input. What do you hear in that? What would you add?
Right.
Just start a conversation. And then, just start that simple exercise. That might open the door to a larger conversation and start getting you down the path of beginning to look at how you might begin to reframe your legacy
Yeah.
and what's going on. Because after all, as we say here, legacy is not what you leave behind, it's what you put in motion.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So Anything else you want to add before we
No, I
close?
thought that was all really interesting. I haven't heard any of that. So yeah.
Okay,
Mm.
cool. Well, thanks everyone for listening to the Legacy Life podcast today. If you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. We have a new episode coming into your uh, YouTube feed, into Spotify and all the other streaming services every Monday. So until next time, thank you so much for tuning in.